What happens when a Hollywood A-lister sits down for what should be a simple morning chat and walks out in the middle of live television? It only took 43 seconds of one host's condescending questions to turn a friendly interview into the most uncomfortable moment in morning show history. Emma Stone arrived at the Today Show studio that morning, expecting the usual promotional circuit experience. She was there to talk about her latest film, a passion project she'd spent years developing. The actress settled into the familiar couch, greeting Savannah Guthrie, Hoda Kotb, and Craig Melvin with warm smiles and easy laughter during the commercial break. But the moment the cameras went live, something shifted. There was an edge to Savannah's expression that hadn't been there seconds before. A certain gleam in her eye that suggested this wasn't going to be the friendly chat Emma had prepared for. Savannah started with what seemed like a standard question, though her tone carried an undercurrent that immediately set off alarms. "Emma, so good to have you here. I have to ask, and I think everyone's wondering this, when are you going to do a real movie again? You know, something people actually want to see?" The studio went quiet. Completely, utterly quiet. Even the crew members behind the cameras exchanged glances, eyebrows raised in disbelief at what they'd just heard. One camera operator actually pulled back from his viewfinder to look at the host directly, as if confirming he'd heard correctly. Emma's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered, though the confusion in her eyes was evident to anyone paying attention. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by a real movie?" Emma asked, her voice measured but firm. She leaned forward slightly, genuinely trying to understand if she'd misheard or misunderstood the question. Savannah leaned back, crossing her legs with an air of casual superiority, settling into the couch like someone preparing to deliver a verdict. "Well, you know what I mean, Emma. Come on. These artsy, independent films you keep doing. They're fine for film festivals and critics, sure, but when was the last time you made something for actual audiences? Something fun? Something people line up to see on opening weekend?" Hoda shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hand moving to adjust her note cards in a nervous gesture. She glanced between her co-host and their guest, clearly recognizing that something was going very wrong, very quickly. Craig looked down at his notes, his jaw tightening as he clearly tried to distance himself from where this was heading. The tension was building with each passing second. Emma took a breath, clearly working to maintain her composure, her hands clasped together in her lap, her knuckles going slightly white with the pressure. "The film I'm here to discuss actually premiered to incredible audience reactions. We had packed theaters in every city we visited during the festival circuit. People have been really connecting with the story. We've gotten thousands of messages from viewers saying how much it moved them, how it made them think differently about things." "Right, but that's not the same as a blockbuster, is it?" Savannah interrupted, waving her hand dismissively, as if swatting away Emma's words like annoying insects. "I mean, let's be honest here. Let's really be honest. You won an Oscar. You were on top of the world. Everyone wanted you, and then you kind of disappeared into these weird little projects nobody's heard of. Projects that don't even get proper theatrical releases half the time." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable now, dripping from every word like poison. Emma's posture straightened, her shoulders pulling back as her professional smile grew thinner and more strained. "I wouldn't call working with some of the most talented directors in the industry disappearing," Emma replied, her tone cooling noticeably. "And I think the millions of people who saw my last 3 films would disagree strongly with the idea that nobody's heard of them. These films played in theaters across the country. They streamed on major platforms. People watched them, discussed them, were moved by them." Savannah laughed, but it wasn't friendly or warm. It was the kind of laugh that said she didn't take Emma seriously, that she found the actress's defense almost pitiable. It was a laugh designed to wound. "Come on, Emma. We both know what I'm talking about. You used to be in movies that mattered. Movies that made real money. Movies that people talked about at the office the next day. Now you're doing these passion projects, and which is just a nice way of saying you're not getting hired for the big stuff anymore. That's what passion project really means, isn't it? That nobody else wanted to pay for it? Emma's eyes flashed with genuine anger for the first time. That's absolutely not what it means. And I think you know that. A passion project means work. That means something to me personally. Work that I believe in enough to fight for. To take less money for if necessary. To dedicate months or years of my life to bringing into the world. Hoda finally spoke up, trying to redirect. Emma, why don't you tell us about the character you play in this new film? But Savannah wasn't finished. She cut across Hoda without even looking at her, her focus laser locked on Emma. Before we move on, I just think it's interesting how actors sometimes confuse being selective with being forgotten. The industry moves fast, Emma. Really fast. You can't really afford to be doing these tiny movies at this point in your career, can you? The window for actresses in Hollywood is already so small, and you're wasting yours on films that barely register with audiences. Emma's eyes flashed. The professional mask was slipping now, revealing genuine hurt and anger beneath. Actually, Savannah, I can afford to do whatever projects speak to me. That's kind of the whole point of being successful in this industry. You get to make choices based on artistry rather than just commercial appeal. You get to work with people you respect, on stories that matter, without having to justify every decision to people who measure worth purely in box office receipts. Artistry, Savannah repeated, loading the word with mockery and disdain, stretching it out as if it tasted bad in her mouth. Is that what we're calling it? Is that the word we're using? Craig attempted to intervene, his voice firm but not aggressive. I actually think what Emma's doing is really admirable, Savannah. Not every actor has the courage to take real risks and do work that challenges them artistically. Savannah shot him a look that could have frozen water, a glare that said, "Stay out of this," in no uncertain terms. She turned back to Emma with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, that didn't contain any warmth whatsoever. Risk is one word for it. Career suicide is another. But hey, if you're happy making movies that 3 people see in an art house theater in Brooklyn, who am I to judge? If that's what success looks like to you now, then I guess congratulations are in order. Clearly you are judging, Emma said, her voice sharper now, cutting through the artificial politeness. That's literally what you've been doing since I sat down. From the very first question, you've been attacking my choices, dismissing my work, and questioning my relevance. This isn't an interview. It's an interrogation. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. The camera operators were getting footage they knew would be replayed endlessly, shared across every social media platform, dissected and analyzed for days or weeks to come. Hoda looked like she wanted to crawl under the couch and disappear. Her usual bright demeanor had completely vanished, replaced by visible distress. Savannah leaned forward, her expression hardening into something cold and calculated. I'm just asking the questions everyone at home is thinking, Emma. That's my job. When Emma Stone signs up for a morning show interview, people expect her to be promoting something worth their time, something they might actually want to see. Instead, we get another lecture about artistic integrity from someone who hasn't been relevant in mainstream Hollywood for years. When was the last time someone stopped you on the street? When was the last time anyone under 30 knew who you were? That was the line. The moment everyone in the studio knew had gone too far. You could see it in the way people's faces changed, in the collective sharp intake of breath from multiple crew members. Even the production assistant in the corner put her hand over her mouth in shock. Emma stood up so abruptly that her microphone pack pulled against its wire, creating a sharp feedback sound that pierced through the studio. Her chair scraped against the floor with a harsh noise that made everyone flinch. You know what, Savannah? I came here this morning in good faith to talk about a film that actually means something. A story about real people facing real struggles, dealing with real emotions. A film that we poured our hearts into. But clearly, you're more interested in tearing me down than having an actual conversation. you made up your mind about this interview before I even walked through that door. Oh, sit down, Emma, Savannah said, her voice dripping with disdain and dismissiveness. She waved her hand as if shooing away a child. Don't be so sensitive. Don't be such a baby about this. This is live television. This is the real world. If you can't handle a few honest questions, maybe you should stick to those safe little indie films where everyone tells you how brave you are for doing the bare minimum. Emma's hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. Honest questions? And you've been attacking me from the second we started. Every single thing you've said has been designed to belittle my work and question my choices. Hoda reached out as if to touch Emma's arm. Emma, please, let's just take a breath and... But Emma stepped back, pulling off her microphone. No, Hoda, I appreciate you trying to smooth this over, but I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected on national television. Savannah actually laughed again. Disrespected? You're being a diva, and I'm doing my job. Maybe if your movies actually made money, you wouldn't be so defensive about them. My last film grossed over $80 million worldwide, Emma shot back. But even if it hadn't, that doesn't give you the right to speak to me like I'm wasting your time. I've been nothing but professional, and you've been hostile from the moment the cameras turned on. Craig finally found his voice again. Savannah, maybe we should move on to... Stay out of this. Craig, Savannah snapped, not even looking at him. She kept her focus locked on Emma. If you're going to storm off like a child, go ahead. But don't expect anyone to take you seriously after this little tantrum. Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. A tantrum? You've spent the last 5 minutes insulting my career, my choices, and my work. You've dismissed everything I've accomplished and mocked me for doing films I'm proud of. And somehow I'm the problem here? The studio had gone completely silent except for their voices. Even the producers in the control room seemed frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this play out. Savannah stood up now too, matching Emma's stance. You want to know what the problem is? The problem is actors like you, who think they're too good for commercial success. You hide behind this artistic superiority while your box office numbers shrink. And then you come on shows like this and expect us to pretend like you're still a big star. I never said I was too good for anything, Emma said, her voice rising. I said I choose projects that matter to me. There's a difference between being selective and being superior. But apparently, you can't understand that. What I understand, Savannah said coldly, is that Europe has been trying to stay relevant by pretending commercial failure is artistic success. The gasp from Hoda was audible. Craig's mouth hung open. Even the crew members looked shocked. Emma stared at Savannah for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, but filled with steel. I've worked with some of the most demanding directors in the world. I've done Broadway. I've won awards and earned respect from people whose opinions actually matter to me. And not once in all of that has anyone spoken to me the way you just did. Maybe they should have, Savannah retorted. Maybe someone needs to tell you that your relevance is fading and these indie darling roles aren't going to save your career. Emma shook her head slowly. You know what's sad, Savannah? I actually used to respect you. I thought you were a real journalist. But this isn't journalism. This is just cruelty disguised as tough questions. If you can't handle tough questions, you're in the wrong business, Savannah said with a shrug. These aren't tough questions. Emma's voice finally broke through her controlled demeanor. Tough questions challenge your subject. They dig deep. They seek truth. What you're doing is just mean. You're being mean for no reason, except apparently you can. Savannah's expression twisted into something ugly. I'm being honest. When if that feels mean to you, maybe you need to take a hard look at your career choices instead of blaming me for pointing out the obvious. The obvious? Emma's laugh was bitter. The obvious is that you decided before I even sat down that you were going to make this difficult. You had an agenda, and it had nothing to do with my film or my work. This was about you wanting to create a moment, and you didn't care who you hurt to get it. Hoda stood up, trying one more time to salvage the situation. Ladies, please. We're all professionals here. Let's just take a second and... No, Hoda, Emma said firmly but kindly. I'm done. I'm not going to continue this interview. Savannah's eyes glittered with something like triumph. Running away? How very brave of you. I'm not running, Emma said, her voice steady again. I'm choosing not to participate in whatever this is. There's a difference. The difference is you can't handle criticism, Savannah pressed. You live in this bubble where everyone tells you how wonderful you are, and the second someone questions your choices, you fall apart. Emma picked up her bag from beside the couch. You really believe that's what this was? Criticism? You called me a has-been. You said my work doesn't matter. You mocked everything I've done for the past several years. That's not criticism. That's just you being needlessly cruel. If the truth is cruel, that's not my problem, Savannah said with a cold smile. Emma looked at her for one last moment. You know what the saddest part of this is. I bet you think you won something here, but all you did was show everyone watching exactly who you are, and it's not pretty. She turned to leave, and Savannah couldn't resist one final shot. Enjoy your irrelevance, Emma. I'm sure there's a film festival somewhere that will still pretend to care. Emma stopped, turned back slowly. And enjoy your empire of cruelty, Savannah. I hope it keeps you warm at night. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma walked toward the exit, her head held high despite the shaking in her hands. Hoda looked like she might cry. Craig sat frozen, staring at his co-host as if seeing her for the first time. Savannah remained standing, arms crossed, or watching Emma leave with an expression that mixed satisfaction and something darker. She seemed to finally realize the cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of what had just transpired. As Emma reached the edge of the set, one of the producers rushed forward, trying to say something to her. She held up a hand, stopping them without a word. She didn't run. She didn't storm off in a dramatic fury. She simply walked away with the dignity that Savannah had tried so hard to strip from her. Back on the couch, Hoda finally found her voice. We're going to take a quick break, she said to the camera, her voice shaking slightly. But Savannah was still standing, still watching the space where Emma had been, as if she couldn't quite believe the actress had actually left. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Doubt, maybe. Or the first hint of realization about what she'd just done. Craig spoke quietly, just loud enough for the microphones to catch. That was way out of line, Savannah. Savannah turned to him sharply. She couldn't handle a real interview. That's not my fault. That wasn't a real interview, Hoda said, her voice stronger now. That was an ambush. Savannah's face flushed. Don't you dare lecture me about how to do my job. Both of you just sat there. Because we were shocked, Craig said. We were waiting for you to stop, to realize you'd gone too far, but you just kept going. The producer's voice came through their earpieces, urgent and panicked. They needed to cut to commercial. They needed to figure out what to do. But Savannah seemed unable to move, locked in place by the weight of what had just happened. In the green room, Emma was already gathering her things. Her publicist rushed in, face pale, my phone already pressed to her ear. But Emma was calm now, calmer than she'd been on the couch. She knew she'd done the right thing. She'd stood up for herself, refused to be diminished, and walked away from toxicity with her dignity intact. Back in the studio, they finally cut to commercial. The second the red light went off, chaos erupted. Producers swarmed the set. Urgent conversations filled the air. But Savannah just stood there, still in the exact spot where Emma had left her, as if frozen in the moment. Hoda removed her microphone and walked off without a word to Savannah. Craig followed, shaking his head. They left Savannah alone on the set, surrounded by crew members who wouldn't meet her eyes. The commercial break felt endless. Makeup artists rushed to touch up whoever would be on camera when they returned. Writers scrambled to figure out what to say. Legal was already on the phone, but there was no fixing what had just happened. No taking back the words that had been broadcast live to millions of viewers. When they came back from commercial, Savannah was seated again, her expression carefully neutral. Hoda sat beside her, professional but distant. Craig had taken up position at the news desk, as far from Savannah as the set allowed. Savannah cleared her throat. "Welcome back. We're going to move on to our next segment now." Her voice was steady, controlled. But anyone watching closely could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. The confidence from minutes before had vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. They pushed through the rest of the show, but the energy was wrong. Every smile forced, every laugh hollow. The chemistry that had made them work as a team had evaporated in those terrible minutes of the Emma Stone interview. Emma, meanwhile, was already in a car heading back to her hotel. Her phone was exploding with messages, but she ignored them all. She stared out the window at the city passing by, processing what had just happened. She'd known it would be a big deal. Walking off a live interview always was, but she also knew she couldn't have stayed. Sitting there, taking Savannah's abuse, would have been worse than any fallout from leaving. Some lines couldn't be uncrossed, and Savannah had sprinted past them without hesitation. Back at the studio, the show finally ended. Part R. The moment they cut to the feed from the local stations, Savannah stood and walked straight to her dressing room without speaking to anyone. The door closed with a heavy thud that echoed through the hallway. Hoda and Craig found each other in the green room, both still processing what they'd witnessed. They'd been colleagues with Savannah for years, but they'd seen something that morning that changed things. You couldn't come back from that kind of cruelty, and especially not when it was broadcast to the world. Producers huddled in offices, already strategizing damage control. The clip was going viral before the show even finished airing. Social media was exploding. Everyone had an opinion, but the footage spoke for itself. No amount of spin could change what people had seen with their own eyes. In her dressing room, Savannah sat at her makeup mirror, staring at her reflection. For the first time since Emma walked off, she was alone with what she'd done. The adrenaline that had fueled her during the interview was fading, replaced by the slow, creeping realization of consequences. She'd pushed too hard. She knew it the moment the words "has been" left her mouth, but she'd been unable to stop. The desire to dominate the interview, to create a viral moment, had overridden her judgment. And now she was sitting in the wreckage of her own creation. Emma Stone had walked out of the studio with her reputation intact, her dignity uncompromised. She'd stood up to bullying and refused to participate in her own humiliation. In doing so, she'd shown strength that would only enhance how people saw her. Savannah Guthrie sat alone, having gotten exactly what she wanted. A moment everyone would talk about. An interview that would be replayed countless times. She'd created something unforgettable. But as she stared at her reflection, she had to wonder if she'd just destroyed everything she'd built in the process. The silence in her dressing room was broken by a knock. Her producer entered without waiting for permission, his expression grim. They needed to talk. There would be meetings, statements to craft, damage to assess, but both of them knew the truth that hung unspoken in the air. You can't unring a bell. You can't unsay words broadcast to millions. And you can't undo the moment when you reveal exactly who you are to a watching world. Emma Stone had known who she was that morning when she sat down on that couch. She was an artist, a professional, someone who chose work she believed in, regardless of box office numbers or industry trends. And when pushed, she'd proven she was also someone who wouldn't compromise her self-respect for anything. Savannah Guthrie had revealed something too. In trying to elevate herself by diminishing her guest, she'd shown a side of herself that no public relations campaign could erase. The mask had slipped, and everyone had seen what was underneath. The interview that was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance had become something else entirely. A line drawn in the sand. A moment that would define both women in different ways. Emma Stone walking away with quiet strength. Savannah Guthrie left behind with her hollow victory. In the hours that followed, the world would pick apart every word, not every expression, every moment of those extraordinary minutes. But the core truth was simple and undeniable. When faced with someone trying to tear her down on live television, Emma Stone had refused to play along. She'd stood up, spoken her truth, and walked away. And sometimes that's the most powerful thing a person can do. Not to fight in the mud with someone determined to drag you down, but to simply refuse to participate. To say, with actions louder than words, that you're worth more than this, that you deserve better, that no interview, no matter how big the platform, is worth surrendering your dignity. The studio cleared out slowly that day. Crew members who'd witnessed everything packed up their equipment with unusual quiet. They'd seen something they wouldn't forget, a moment that had made them uncomfortable and angry and sad all at once. They'd watched someone they respected stand up for herself, and someone they'd admired reveal a cruel streak none of them wanted to acknowledge. Emma Stone's film would go on to be successful, though not in the way Savannah had mockingly predicted. People would seek it out, curious about the actress who'd walked off a major morning show. They'd watch her work and see the talent and commitment Savannah had tried to dismiss. The controversy, meant to diminish her, would instead shine a light on everything she'd been trying to share. And in the end, that morning at the Today Show became a story about two very different kinds of power. The power to wound with words and position and platform, and the power to walk away from toxicity, to refuse to be diminished, to choose self-respect over the approval of someone who'd shown they didn't deserve it. Emma Stone had walked into that studio as an acclaimed actress promoting her work. She walked out as something more. A reminder that grace under fire sometimes looks like knowing when to leave. That strength isn't always about standing your ground, but about recognizing when the ground isn't worth standing on. The lights in the Today Show studio eventually went dark. Another day of programming done. But the ghost of what happened that morning would linger in those halls. Every time someone sat on that couch for an interview, they'd remember. Every host would wonder if they were being fair or just cruel. Every guest would know that walking away was always an option. Because in 43 seconds, everything had changed. A casual cruelty had sparked a fire. A guest had become a hero for refusing to accept disrespect. And a host had learned, too late, that some victories are actually defeats wearing a crown. The story would be told and retold. The clip would be analyzed endlessly. People would debate who was right and who was wrong, though to anyone who'd actually watched, the answer was painfully clear. But beyond all the noise and opinions and hot takes, one truth remained. Emma Stone had walked out of that interview, but she'd walked away with something Savannah Guthrie had lost the moment she let cruelty guide her words. The respect of everyone watching. The knowledge that when tested, she'd chosen correctly. The quiet confidence that comes from standing up for yourself when it matters most. And that, more than any box office number or critical acclaim or industry validation, was worth everything.